My name is Harper Reed. I'm 34, and I was to them the family failure, the quiet daughter who ran off to live a small life in Dallas. In reality, I was the risk strategy director at Ascend Global, a multi-billion-dollar tech investment fund, and the wife of Elias Vance, the CEO of Aeronova, one of the most powerful private space tech companies in the U.S. Our marriage was a carefully guarded multi-million-dollar secret that the Reed family, my father, the self-proclaimed auto dealership magnate, and my mother, the charity circuit queen, knew absolutely nothing about. They had invited me to Chloe's 30th birthday party in Chicago, not out of love, but as a spectacle, a prop to showcase their perfect golden child. I still feel the cold, sticky cream frosting melting down my cheek, and I hear the sound of the laughter, a sound that was pure, unrestrained delight, aimed directly at my humiliation. My mother had just shoved a 3-tier vanilla bean cake into my face, and the entire ballroom erupted in cheers and applause, all for the amusement of my sister Chloe Reed. They thought they were destroying me. They had no idea they were just setting off a chain reaction that would destroy everything they had built. This time, however, the prop was ready to talk. Before we get into the full story of how I brought down the empire, tell me in the comments below, what time and what city are you watching this from? I'd love to know how far my story is traveling. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right now. You don't want to miss the fallout from this cake-smashing disaster. 3 days before the storm, I was in my secured Chicago penthouse apartment, the one my family genuinely believed was a cramped, poorly lit studio rental in a questionable part of the city. I was seated at a massive cherry wood table, not planning an investment strategy, but planning my own disguise. The invitation from my parents, Victor and Deborah Reed, had been clear in its subtext: "Come and be reminded of your place." Chloe's 30th birthday was the family's annual performance review, and I was always the underperforming asset. The last time I'd been home, my father Victor had asked me how my little job was going, making air quotes around the word little, while simultaneously touting Chloe's latest lifestyle blogging deal worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The strategy for this event, which I had already discussed with my husband Elias and Marcus Bell, my general counsel at Ascend, was surgical. I had to look successful enough not to be an embarrassment, but inconspicuous enough not to raise any dangerous questions. My chosen outfit for the evening was intentionally muted, a charcoal gray wool dress, expensive, but utterly forgettable, and plain black leather heels. Marcus Bell, a man who navigated corporate espionage with the ease of breathing, had been my consigliere on all things related to the Reed family for years, helping me maintain my deep cover. We were on a video call, the screen displaying his calm, focused face. "Harper, we've secured the latest audit reports on Victor Reed's dealerships, the ones tied up with the nonprofit foundation Deborah runs," Marcus stated, his voice low and professional. "The asset diversification is highly questionable. It screams tax fraud, maybe embezzlement through the charity. My mother Deborah always used her charity, the Reed Legacy Fund, as a social weapon, not a tool for good. I had long suspected they were using it to launder money or evade taxes, the way Victor always skirted the edges of the law in his car dealership empire. Don't worry about me, Marcus," I reassured him, running a hand over the embossed birthday card. "I know the objective. Walk in, endure the ritual, humiliation, confirm their desperation, and walk out. Elias will handle the dramatic entrance part later, but I need to set the stage for the narrative now." I glanced at a photo of Chloe grinning widely, posing with a ridiculous trophy from a local Best Lifestyle Influencer award. Her life was an immaculate, polished lie built on my parents' money and her manipulative charm. I knew exactly what they expected from me: silence, gratitude for being invited, and the appearance of struggling contentment. They needed to believe I was nothing without their approval, a concept they had brutally enforced since childhood. Elias's instructions were simple: wear the dress, Harper, but keep the diamond tennis bracelet on. Not the 2-carat stones, the 10-carat ones. just for me. And remember why you're there. Not to be their daughter, but to be the person who writes their final risk report. I looked at the gray dress and then at the sparkle of the bracelet in my hand. It was a visual contradiction, the wallflower with the wrist worth more than Victor Reed's annual profit. I knew the moment the door closed behind me at that party, I was stepping not into a family gathering, but into the final scene of a 5-act tragedy, and I was about to direct the finale. I tucked the bracelet away, ensuring only the charcoal wool would be visible for the initial acts. The old Harper Reed, the one they despised, was making one last public appearance. The details of the velvet blue box that held the invitation always pulled me back to the moment the nightmare truly began over 15 years ago. My childhood was never about celebrating, it was about contrast. Chloe was the golden child, the centerpiece, the one who effortlessly absorbed all the adoration and resources. I was the cautionary tale, the one who needed correction, the lost asset who required continuous adjustment. I was 8 years old when Chloe, who was 10, deliberately snapped the neck off my favorite ceramic doll, a gift from my deceased grandmother. When I cried and confronted her, she simply smiled, then immediately screamed, running to Mom and claiming I had attacked her first because I was jealous of her straight A's. Without a second thought, Deborah, my mother, grabbed me by the arm and dragged me up the stairs, forcing me to apologize, and then grounding me for a week while Chloe was given a new bike. This pattern defined our lives. Chloe caused the trouble. I absorbed the punishment. She never had to do chores. I was responsible for everything from laundry to managing the household bills when I was barely a teenager to teach me responsibility. As Victor always said, while Chloe was busy attending expensive ballet lessons she rarely finished. The most vivid memory, the one that hardened me, was the day of my 18th birthday. I was supposed to have a small celebration. My only request was dinner at a downtown restaurant. Instead, that morning, Chloe decided she needed to audition for an obscure last-minute web series role, and it conflicted with my dinner time. Deborah, without even looking up from her tablet, told me, "Harper, you're an adult now. You can handle rescheduling. Chloe needs to focus on her career. This is a big opportunity." Victor, my father, backed her up with a chilling professionalism. He sat me down in his office, not as a father, but as a corporate accountant. "Look at the metrics, Harper. Chloe is our brand equity. She represents the perfect Reed image: beauty, effortless talent, and connection. You, on the other hand, are an unpredictable liability, a sunk cost, as it were. Your grades are good, but you lack the charisma we need to maintain our social standing. You need to focus on supporting the family brand. Your birthday is a minor inconvenience compared to Chloe's future." That word liability stuck. I was not a person. I was a budget line item that needed to be cut. Chloe, meanwhile, came home late that night, didn't apologize, and demanded I make her a sandwich. They celebrated her audition, which she failed with more enthusiasm than they had ever shown for any of my academic achievements. The crushing truth was that my parents actively fostered Chloe's cruelty, rewarding her entitlement and punishing my efforts to be independent. They wanted me compliant, unseen, and available to prop up Chloe's facade whenever necessary. I realized that day that nothing I did would ever earn their love, only my silence. That realization became my armor. I stopped trying to please them and started planning my escape and my counterattack. The afternoon of the party arrived with a cold snap, typical Chicago weather in October. I stepped out of the black Uber I had deliberately rented, not the armored sedan Elias insisted on, in front of the Fairmont Chicago, a beacon of old money luxury. I pulled my gray wool coat tighter, adjusting the simple, almost austere silk scarf around my neck. I looked like a junior analyst who had splurged on one nice suit to attend a mandatory work event. This was the perception I wanted to maintain. Entering the vast ballroom felt like stepping back in time, the air thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the drone of self-congratulatory chatter. Deborah Reed. My mother immediately spotted me. She wore a deep emerald gown that screamed old money with new plastic, and her face, taut from recent procedures, didn't soften in greeting. "Harper, you actually made it?" she said, her tone dripping with patronizing surprise, not pleasure. She didn't hug me. She performed a quick air kiss gesture near my ear. "That dress is certainly brown. Very safe. Did you even try?" She glanced at her perfectly manicured nails. "Never mind. Your father and I are busy with the sponsors. Your table is near the back. It's table 42, the overflow section. Don't cause any fuss, dear. We need Chloe's night to be perfect." Table 42. The Table of Exiles. It was tucked against the service entrance, practically hidden by a massive floral centerpiece that obscured the main stage. It was where the Reeds placed distant relatives, business acquaintances they barely tolerated, or people they wanted to publicly signal as unimportant. I walked over my movements, slow and controlled, absorbing the stares of the few people at the other remote tables. At table 42, there was only one other person seated. A young man in his early 20s, nursing a soda and looking profoundly uncomfortable in his borrowed suit. He was fiddling with his phone, his eyes darting around the room with intense curiosity. He was too earnest to be a Reed business associate, too poorly dressed to be a genuine socialite. "Hi, you must be family," he muttered, immediately embarrassed. Or maybe just lost. "I'm Skylar, a second cousin once removed. I'm Chloe's age, but apparently not important enough to sit with the important people." I offered a genuine small smile. "I'm Harper, Chloe's sister. And yes, I think we are the lost ones." Skylar's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of understanding passing between us. He leaned in conspiratorially. "I'm here with my parents, but I'm actually a journalism student. I'm supposed to be networking, but honestly, this whole thing is fascinating. It's a masterclass in performative wealth." I'm live tweeting some of the ridiculousness anonymously, of course. He showed me a post referencing the sheer waste of the event. I saw an opportunity. "That's a brave career path, Skylar," I commented. "Observation is key to success in any field, even finance. You should keep that camera ready tonight. You never know when a true moment of drama might unfold, the kind that defines a news cycle." I saw a momentary doubt in his eyes, but the thrill of a potential scoop was more powerful. I settled into my chair, the heavy silk tablecloth feeling cold against my knees. I was exactly where they wanted me, forgotten, marginalized, and ready to be mocked. But now I had an unexpected and crucially placed ally at the table of exiles, ready to document the night. The lights dimmed again as Victor Reed, my father, took the stage. Victor, a man whose entire personality was wrapped up in the profitability of his luxury car dealerships and his inflated sense of self-importance, tapped the microphone. This wasn't a speech. It was a public declaration of the family hierarchy, the annual reaffirmation that Chloe was the masterpiece and I was the smudge on the canvas. The crowd hushed, composed mainly of Victor's business partners, Deborah's charity donors, and Chloe's sponsored friends. Victor launched into a 10-minute eulogy for Chloe, listing her achievements, most of which were inflated or simply paid for. He referred to her as the embodiment of the Reed legacy, our most successful investment, and the face of the future. The applause was obligatory and loud. Then his eyes, scanning the room, momentarily paused on table 42. I watched him consciously adjust his expression, shifting from proud father to somber, disappointed patriarch. And of course, he began, his voice dropping just enough to force the audience to lean in. "We have my other daughter, Harper." The silence was immediate and thick. Harper. Victor continued, shaking his head slightly, affecting a look of concern. "She is a testament to the fact that not all risks pay off. She chose a path of anonymity. A life, shall we say, in the shadows. We respect her choice to pursue a quiet, understated career path, a life that requires none of the spotlight, none of the visibility, none of the inherent success we've built this family on. She is a reminder that even the Reed name can't always guarantee an outcome. She is quite simply the one who runs from the spotlight, the one who gave up on the family brand. A failed experiment, if you will. The laughter this time was nervous, uncomfortable, but undeniably there. It was the confirmation I needed. My family was not just prejudiced. They were cruel, using me as a public punchline to elevate Chloe further. I felt Skylar shift uncomfortably next to me, his attention completely riveted. Just then my phone vibrated in my clutch bag. It was Elias. The text was terse, exactly what I needed landed. ETA 15. The final evidence is secure. That was the green light. I looked up at my father, who was still basking in the glow of his callous performance, and a quiet, icy resolve settled over me. The old Harper would have cried hidden or left. The new Harper, the risk strategy director, saw this humiliation not as a setback, but as the final data point required before launching the counterattack. They wanted a show. I would give them a show that would make their carefully constructed lives look like a cheap house of cards. Victor concluded his speech with another toast to Chloe, and the tension dissipated slightly, but the damage was done. My public shaming was now officially part of the evening's program. I looked at Skylar, who was openly staring at me with a mixture of pity and horror. He saw the coldness in my eyes and didn't speak a word. The band started playing a cheerful tune, but for me, the music had stopped the moment Victor called me a failure. I reached for a glass of water, my hand steady, waiting for the next scene to begin. I knew exactly where Deborah would corner me next, and I was going to be ready for her manipulation. The celebratory chatter resumed, but the feeling of being hunted never left me. I deliberately stood up and headed toward a quiet side corridor near the restrooms, predicting my mother's next move. I didn't have to wait long. Deborah Reed materialized behind me, her expression shifting instantly from the saccharine smile she wore for the crowd to a mask of pure, vicious control. "Harper, we need to talk." Now she hissed, pulling me into a small, empty staging area lined with event equipment. "I saw your face during Victor's speech. I don't appreciate that look of self-pity. You will wipe it off. Your presence here is a gift, not a right." She crossed her arms, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "I also saw the car you arrived in. A cheap Uber. Good. Keep up the charade. Because if you breathe a single word about your actual job, your real job, or your pathetic husband, I will ensure Victor uses his contacts to make sure you never work in this town or any major city again. You will be blacklisted so thoroughly you'll be applying for minimum wage jobs." The threat was delivered with cold sincerity, mirroring the countless times she had used emotional blackmail to keep me compliant. Before I could reply, Chloe swaggered in her face, flushed with champagne and triumph. She was wearing a custom designer gown and the smug look of someone who had just won a prize they didn't earn. "What's she going to do, Mom? Tell everyone she's a successful banker? Nobody would believe her." "She's too boring," Chloe sneered, taking a sip from her flute. "Look at her still dressing like a nun. You know, Harper. It's amazing. I break your grandmother's vase, you get grounded. I get caught shoplifting. Mom says it's an isolated incident. I win awards for being beautiful, and you get called a failure by Dad in front of everyone. It's called karma, darling. You were always just the mistake." The familiar poisonous words, the echoes of 1,000 childhood traumas, finally broke the last sliver of my carefully constructed composure. I looked at my sister, not with pity, but with a searing hatred that felt earned. "You weren't caught shoplifting, Chloe. You were caught with stolen merchandise in your bag, and Dad paid off the store and the arresting officer. And the only thing you've ever won is the lottery of parental delusion. You're not a brand, you're a liability waiting to happen, and your success is built on a mountain of fraud." That was the red line. Chloe's eyes flashed with rage, and she lunged, grabbing the front of my dress. "You little liar! You always try to ruin things." She shoved me violently against a table holding the extravagant 3-tiered birthday cake which had just been wheeled in for the cutting ceremony. The table shuddered and the massive cake wobbled precariously. Before I could regain my footing, my mother Deborah saw her opportunity to eliminate the problem with maximum effect. She grabbed the entire top tier of the cake, the one with the glittering 30 candle, and with a surprisingly brutal force slammed it directly into my face. "Happy birthday, Chloe!" she shrieked, her voice thick with insane laughter. The cream, the frosting, and the flimsy cardboard structure exploded over my eyes, nose, and mouth. The sound was deafening, the smell sickeningly sweet. Outside, the guests, having heard the commotion and the subsequent shriek of laughter, surged forward. They didn't gasp in horror. They burst out laughing and cheering, egging on the spectacle. I heard Chloe's triumphant squeal. I was blinded, humiliated, and shaking with a silent fury. The humiliation was absolute. Just then, a quick, almost imperceptible click came from the corner of the room. I knew exactly what it was. Skylar had captured the moment. The stage was set. The laughter washed over me, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of guests delighting in my utter degradation. I stood there frozen, the sugary mess blinding me, the raw anger of physical burning in my chest. Chloe was jumping up and down, pointing and screaming with glee, and Deborah was beaming satisfied with her vicious act of loyalty to her favorite daughter. They had accomplished their goal, public execution of the family black sheep. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. I had come prepared to die, but not alone. I raised my hand and slowly wiped the thick cream from my eyes, revealing an expression that was no longer hurt, but utterly cold. I could hear Skylar fumbling with his phone, clearly struggling with the gravity of what he had just witnessed. "Enjoy the view. Mom, Chloe, is this what true family joy looks like?" My voice was low, cutting through the diminishing laughter. Suddenly the music stopped. The massive double doors at the far end of the ballroom burst open, not in a polite entry, but in an abrupt, commanding manner. Every head snapped toward the entrance. Standing there, framed by two intensely focused, massive security guards in expensive suits, was Elias Vance. He wasn't dressed for a party. He was dressed for a hostile takeover, a sharp, dark suit that cost more than Victor's latest Ferrari, and an aura of icy authority that commanded instant silence. Elias Vance, the CEO of Aeronova, a man whose name was whispered with reverence in the highest echelons of global technology, surveyed the scene, a woman covered in cake, surrounded by laughing elites. His face was a mask of dangerous neutrality, his eyes fixed only on me. The air in the room became instantly thin. Victor Reed, who recognized Elias from business magazines, stammered, "Mr. Vance?" What a surprise. Before anyone could process the gravity of his presence, Elias walked directly past Victor, ignoring him completely, and stopped beside me. He didn't offer comfort, he offered power. He pulled a crisp white handkerchief from his pocket and gently, meticulously wiped the remaining frosting from my face. "You've completed your surveillance, Harper. The risk assessment is complete," he said, loud enough for the sudden silence to carry his words. I straightened my shoulders, taking a deep breath. This was my stage. I faced my parents and the stunned crowd. "Allow me to reintroduce myself," I stated, my voice steady, though still slightly hoarse. "I am Harper Reed Vance. Not the Harper Reed who runs from the spotlight, but the one who has been operating in the shadows. I am not a sunk-cost Victor. I am the Risk Strategy Director for Ascend Global. And Elias Vance is my husband. We've been married for 2 years. The collective sound of gasps filled the room. Victor's face turned from confusion to a sickly mottled purple. Deborah looked like she might pass out on her custom emerald dress. Chloe just stood there, her mouth open, the triumph wiped clean from her face. I didn't give them time to recover. I looked directly at Victor. "The reason I came back was to finish the due diligence on your failing business, Victor. You've been running the numbers through Deborah's legacy fund for years. That's tax fraud, and the embezzlement is obvious. Marcus just sent the final files. You're compromised. And Chloe, your perfect brand is built on a foundation of lies and a father's money. I pointed to the cake mess. This, I said, looking at Deborah, was the last piece of evidence I needed of the environment of systematic abuse and corruption you raised your golden child in. It proves intent. The party is over. Elias, let's go. Victor Reed expect a subpoena from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and Deborah, the IRS, will be interested in your charity's spending over the last decade. Goodbye. Elias placed a firm hand on the small of my back, and we walked out, leaving a ballroom full of frozen, terrified people and a ruined sticky cake. As Elias Vance and I exited the ballroom, the silence was still ringing in my ears, but it was quickly replaced by the urgent, frantic whispers of a party collapsing in real time. Victor Reed's voice, a raw, strangled scream, followed us down the corridor, threatening lawsuits and ruin. He threatened the wrong person. Elias paused, turning back just enough for his voice to carry the lethal calm of absolute power. Victor, the only ruin happening tonight is yours. I suggest you focus on finding a very good defense lawyer. We'll handle the rest. When we were safely in the armored car heading away from the disaster zone, Elias turned to me, his expression softening. You were incredible, Harper. You owned the moment. I simply leaned my head against his shoulder, still tasting the artificial sweetness of the cake, finally letting out the breath I'd been holding since childhood. I cut the ties, Elias. I cut them for good. The next morning, the real consequence began. Skylar, the young journalism student I had met at the Table of Exiles, had uploaded his video titled "The Cake Smash Heiress Tech CEO's Wife, Publicly Humiliated by Family Drops Bomb on Charity Fraud." The video, raw and undeniable, showing the entire act of violence, and my subsequent confrontation with Victor and Deborah, went viral instantly. Within hours, it had millions of views on every social media platform. The humiliation was not mine anymore. It was theirs, broadcast globally. The social media outrage was immense. Victor Reed's car dealership contracts began dissolving within 24 hours, the public associating his brand with corporate fraud and domestic cruelty. Deborah's beloved Reed Legacy Fund was officially frozen pending an investigation into the financial discrepancies I had exposed. The video of her gleeful face smashing a cake into her daughter's face decimated her social standing. The donors fled, unwilling to be tied to a scandal of that magnitude. Chloe, the golden child, suffered the most immediate consequence. Her largest, most lucrative sponsorship deals were canceled, the companies unwilling to attach their products to the viral video's co-conspirator. The family brand that Victor had so mercilessly protected, the one he had tried to force me to uphold, was now toxic. I had been called a sunk cost, but they were the ones who were permanently depreciated. They tried to contact me, pleading, threatening, using every emotional manipulation tactic in their arsenal. But they were met only with silence from my side and a cold, professional wall of lawyers from Marcus Bell's firm. The separation was complete, absolute, and publicly documented. The goal was never revenge, though the satisfaction was immense. The goal was freedom, and I achieved it not by running, but by facing the monster they created and dismantling its power structure. I look back now, not with anger, but with clarity. The greatest risk I ever took wasn't marrying Elias or exposing my parents' fraud. It was accepting that I was not the villain in their story, but the victim who had the strength to write her own ending. For anyone watching this who has ever been made to feel like the failure, the liability, or the black sheep, remember this. The people who belittle you to feel tall are standing on a foundation of sand. The only validation you need is the one you give yourself. Don't just survive their cruelty. Use the pain to build something they can never touch. Something that proves their valuation of you was wrong all along. I lost a family that never loved me, but I gained an empire. And more importantly, I finally gained myself. That more than any billion-dollar deal is the true win.